My wife's normally here, but she's pregnant with our fourth. And she gets really sick during the first part, so if you haven't seen her in a while, she's been pretty much bedridden for 2 months. It's not my fault. So, but she's slowly getting better. She misses and prays for everybody, and hopefully she'll be back soon. Because she actually was going to be the one doing this. So you guys get the alternate. And we know the alternate is always way better than the original. So, let me start my testimony. I just want you to know it's going to be boring. I'm a pretty boring guy. Don't do a lot of things. So, all right. I was born a cute pagan baby, right? Wasn't baptized yet. And then I was baptized as said cute baby. It's going to be a lot about me being a cute baby, so just sit back and be here for a while. I was raised Catholic by my mom, not so much my dad. My dad was there. They stayed together. He was supportive, but he appreciated more sitting in his underwear on Sundays versus this. And now that I have kids, I totally get it. I understand completely. But and then raised Catholic, CCD, all the good stuff. I did life team at St. Thomas Aquinas as a teenager throughout my teenage years. If that correlates for you, thanks. And then after that, I did the youth ministry for 6.5 years at St. Joe's on Rio Grande across from Pius. So I've never really been away from the faith. I guess I call it God's given me this continual conversion blessing. I don't have a big story about coming back around, or I don't have any big aha moments. It's more just a lot of little intimate moments with God that have just kind of cemented everything through the years and allowed my faith to stabilize. It's I've never been too emotional about my faith. So story being, when I was in high school, Passion of the Christ came out, right? Mel Gibson, it's not Jesus Christ Superstar. Date myself here. But we got a group together to go see it, and we all showed up separately, and I sat down in the movie theater, and it was very emotionally charged already. There was a lot of grandmas that knew what was coming, and they were already dabbing their tears, praying the rosary, and I looked around and I realized I had made a big mistake. Number one, I looked around and I told myself, I am literally the only one that bought popcorn and a soda for this. That was my bad. I was the only guy in the movie theater that maybe when he was there watching the movie, if you heard someone crunching down on some popcorn as Jesus was getting scourged. That was me. Sorry. I apologize. But it was just this, it was this very emotionally charged setting, right? People wanted to go and experience what Christ experienced, because we don't get to do that in the visual sense in terms of we know Christ sacrificed himself for us, laid down his life for us. We see it every week at Mass, every day at Mass, right? We see the crucifixion and the resurrection, but we don't see it. I just wanted to go and learn more about it. I read the book. I knew how the story ended, and how he won, so I was good, right? But I wanted to see it to learn it, and that was kind of the difference for me. And going into that was an example. Everyone was ready to feel that, and I just wanted to see it. I didn't have this big emotional, I tried. I promise you I tried. I was sitting there and I'm like, gosh, I really want to cry, because I'm the only one not crying. And then as I put more popcorn into my mouth, I realized it was not going to happen for that movie. So, it does take a lot for me to get emotional about things. I get angry or sad or happy like anybody else, but I don't experience these big waves, that a lot of people do. I don't like weddings. I love wedding receptions, right? Baptisms are cool, but if there's no cake afterwards, why do you talk to me, right? Things like that. Just things. I don't have this big range of things going on for me. It's one of those things that, God's allowed me to be steady, and I appreciate it. I do feel like sometimes I miss out on those great highs. People, when we were teens, kids coming back from retreats, just oh my God, I love God, right? All these things, God, Jesus. But yeah, that was cool. It was a great weekend. And I feel like I missed those, right? So sometimes I question, God, how come I can't feel like that? But I also know a lot of those same people had this great existential crisis, this big, just bottomless fall that they experienced in their faith. And I've also never experienced that. And I count that as a great blessing. God's been able to keep me steady, and I know God is moving. I don't have this doubt. I know God is moving, but it's also I expect it of Him. And in my relationship with God, I very much expect Him to continually move in my life and all our lives. And it's not some demand that I have. I expect it of Him because He promised us, right? This is from the Dewey Rames Bible, so it's got the thous and the these. So, but it's Matthew 16:18. And I say to thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall never prevail against it. Like God promised us, like I've got your back always, and I'm comfortable with that. I have no issue with that. You know, we've had all these scandals going on. We've had all these really trusted people do extremely terrible things. And I think as any practicing Catholic, it hurts deep. As any human being, that hurts us deep. Because we automatically have a trust, right? But it's never shaken my faith in the church because God promised us, God promised me, it'll never prevail. It'll never prevail. And so that doubt has never had to cross my mind. You know, like I said, I've been scared of everything, doubted everything, but it's never been something that has just fallen from me. You know, and I do praise God. Now, I do always still look for proof, though. I always ask questions. You know, I did confirmation, I helped teach confirmation here last year, and during the exit interviews before they get confirmed, one of the teens apologized for having questions about the faith, and I told her, no, absolutely not. That's amazing. You should always have questions about the faith. If you don't have questions, or if you don't ask the questions, you can't form yourself in further. Right? God didn't give this to us so that we could just stay where we're at, right? God didn't give the church to the apostles so that they could stay in the upper room hiding. He gave them the church so that they can go out to the world and spread it. Because you can't go out into the world without asking questions or being asked those questions and facing them head on. And so, I didn't pat her on the back, but I told her, that's awesome. You keep asking those questions. And so for me, though, a lot of where that comes from is, I'm not an expert, but I love astronomy and space and the universe. I think that stuff's really cool. I have since I was a kid. I went to space camp in Alamogordo as a kid. Someone stole my wallet, so it wasn't a very good time. But I get to say that I went to space camp, so that was cool. Except for that kid. But it's always held my attention. Right? And one of my favorite quotes, the first time I came across this quote was in a book written by Pope Benedict XVI. I don't remember what that book was called, but I remember the quote. So it's by Robert Jastrow. He was an astronomer and a physicist, and he worked for NASA, right? So NASA went to the moon, all that kind of stuff. We just celebrated the anniversary, Apollo 11. Hopefully I got that number right. But he says in one of his books, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over that final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. And that's the entirety of the quote in Pope Benedict's book. Right? The scientists who have believed in their power of reason, they're finally going to climb that peak. And really what the peak is the Big Bang. As far as astronomy is most likely going to ever be able to see back is when you look back in time, because the further you look out in space, that's further back in time, is the Big Bang. It's just this crazy Big Bang, and it's a big explosion. You can't see through that, right? They're going to hit that point, and they're going to realize that the faithful have been sitting at that same point for centuries and pondering God and coming to know God and understanding we're not going to know everything because we're human beings, right? So that was the part that was in the book, and it intrigued me more, and so I went to go look at more. And the next piece to that quote, he says, scientists have no proof that life was not the result of an action of creation, but they are driven by the nature of their profession to seek explanations for the origin of life that lie within the boundaries of natural law. And so it's the natural law that I like to look at. That it's everything happens, I wouldn't call it a reason, but everything happens because there's a law that mandates it, right? If I jump up, I'm going to go down because gravity, right? So, and that draws me, and it reminded me of Job, right? Everyone knows the story of Job, but specifically when God starts talking to Job, when Job's having his crisis, And it's in Job 38. It says, "Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me," God talking to Job, "where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched a line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy." Right, like, you got it all figured out, bud. Let me know what happens. And it's something that really does speak to me, because, in dealing with doubts and just that thing, I see everyone searching for answers. I work at Sandia Labs, and I have these colleagues that are incredibly smart, and they're always searching for answers, but they go in all these different directions. And they have like these little personal crises when they can't figure something out. Or they just beat the same problem over and over and over again. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm incredibly comfortable in living a life where I know I don't understand. I'm incredibly content telling them, I don't know. I don't get it either. Crazy, right? And for a lot of them, it's not good enough because they feel like, well, I'm a man. I'm a woman, I'm a human being. I should be able to figure this out. I'm smart enough, and I agree with you, but I don't get it either, right? So our conversations don't go very far after that point. But it doesn't mean I live in ignorance. Understanding that we cannot understand doesn't mean we're living a life of ignorance. Because it doesn't mean we're not looking for answers. We're not striving for answers, right? It's just the fact that as human beings, we have a cap, right? We don't have the ability to understand everything, and that's okay. Right? So one of the examples, going back to space, is black holes. Right? As recently as 1970, all the way through the 1990s, that's when they were discovering that black holes actually existed. As today, we kind of think about it like, yeah, that's just a thing. That's a thing that exists in the world. But for the longest time, humanity, the smartest people in the world, is like, nope, those don't exist. And so finally, someone set out to prove it, and through all science, mumbo jumbo and stuff, they found it. And they found out that it did exist, right? And they not only found out that it did exist, they found out exactly what caused it. This thing that we cannot understand, right? They found out exactly what caused it, okay? But then at the same time, they can't understand what is actually in the black hole. There's a stopping point, and the thing is, the way the black hole works, we're never going to find out. Black hole is like pure gravity. Anything we tried to send in there would just be destroyed before we would get any readings back. Not to mention how far away it is, and you can't do that, right? But it would be destroyed. As you enter a black hole, you would literally be flattened into a piece of paper, and time would slow down. Legitimately, time would slow down. So you would be living in this life, and everything around you would just be spinning incredibly fast. So by the time you came out, no one would even know you existed. If you could survive being a piece of paper, right? That'd be pretty cool. We lost plan. Not that I'm looking at those. They're there. So, but they thought it was ridiculous, right? And so I recently had this conversation with one of my coworkers. His name's Nathan. He's funny. We had this big conversation about whether God could exist, right? And that turned into, could everything actually have been created with a plan? Could it have been structurally created, or did it come from chaos? And his point was, look, out of chaos came order. Something happened, and a big bang happened, and out it came. And because there's an infinite number of possibilities, we exist. But the problem with that is, if you go back to natural law, right, natural order, there was natural law when the Big Bang existed. And we know that because the Big Bang happened, right? Something ran into something, and natural law dictated that when those two somethings ran into each other, there was going to be a giant explosion. And so I told him, here's why I just don't believe it's out of chaos, because there was an order that made that explosion happen. If there was chaos, there's no order to make that explosion happen. And if I go any much further than that, I don't understand what I'm saying. I barely understand what I just said, right? I'm at my limits here, okay? But at the same time, I'm completely happy being there. I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to understand more, but I'm good. Right? Because God promised me that we're good. Right? I can understand that there's always been a natural law from the beginning of time, and I accept that, and I'm happy. God promised me He's got us covered, so I don't need more than that. I don't need more than that because I'm a human being. I'm his creation, right? The thing that started it all, the person, the God that started everything, has promised me I'm good. So, I also think it's kind of cool. I'm diverting here. I also think it's kind of cool the fact that something that pumps me up, that makes me cheerful about it all, though, is at the same time, I don't understand everything, right? The fact is, I don't understand, how St. Joseph Cupertino, levitated. We have a saint that literally flew through the air, right? If people had superpowers, that'd be kind of at the top of the list, right? And stories go that he literally, levitated so high that he put a cross on top of the church because the crane mechanism broke. So he's like, I've got this for you, right? Just the dude just flies up, puts a cross on there, and comes back down. That'd be pretty weird, but it's awesome. It happened, right? Padre Pio bilocated, was in 2 places at once. I don't understand that there were saints that had their heads chopped off and they just continued walking around. Although I'm pretty sure that happened because I think God has the same sense of humor as I do. I can't prove it, but if I was him, that'd be one of the things I do. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, but the fact is when people look at the Marvel, the Avengers, they look at Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, right? They look at all these things gosh, I wish we could do that. I wish we could live in a world like that. And it's we do. We do live in a world like that. I don't look like Captain America, right? But I could, right? But I don't. And the fact is, though, that through faith in God, and if God decided, yeah, this is going to make a difference, or for whatever reason I'm God, I think it'd be funny if you turn into Captain America, right? It could happen. Right, but we know there's all these miracles that have happened, right? There's a miracle here at St. John Vianney where the face of Christ appeared on the cover of the tabernacle. You can see it back there before you leave, right? There's all these miracles where the Eucharist turned into the flesh of heart, right? The wine and the chalice, when it transformed into Christ's blood during Mass, it became blood, not like the good tasting stuff on Sunday, right? It became blood, right? All these miracles, and we live in a world that is exciting. Just to repeat myself so we all are on the same page, I am not Captain America, right? But we live in a world that God has afforded humanity the opportunity to know there is greatness out there. He has shown us everything we need to know. And sometimes it's hard living in today's world, I get it. Working in Sandia, you get some really smart individuals who can walk circles around me and trying to prove that God does not exist. Or trying to prove why abortion should be the thing, why we should have a cat. Everyone can only have 2 kids, right? And it's I already have 4. Are you going to take my other 2? And then I fight them because they threaten my children, right? So we have this thing, and it's hard to see that sometimes. And so coming back to God every time, just coming back to that steadiness that God has blessed me with. Look, I don't have crazy stuff in my life. I have no crazy stories. But I have this relationship with God that is it's been a rock. And it's been a stand to stand on. It's just been a place for me to go. And there's no fighting it. There's no fighting what God promised us. There's no fighting what God has given us, right? And that's just kind of what I see in my life. And it's just so amazing to learn and to more and to search for that truth. And the reason it is, though, is because that's also what's placed in our hearts. If you're not doing that, you're not fulfilling what you were made for. Okay? And Carlo walked out. I was going to reference him here, but he walked out. That's awesome timing. So, anywho. Hey, Carlo, you know? Yeah, I do know. Oh, good. Okay. So, anywho, this is one of my go-to references whenever I do. I still do retreats. I do a confirmation retreat for Farmington every year. I'm leading the SJV, the St. John Vianney confirmation retreat again this year. One of the things that we go through is the very first paragraph in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This literally describes what we're doing, right? God, infinitely perfect and blessed in himself, in a plan of sheer goodness, freely created man to make him share in his own blessed life. For this reason, at every time and in every place, God draws close to man. He calls man to seek him, to know him, and to love him with all his strength. He calls together all men, scattered and divided by sin, into the unity of his family, the church. To accomplish this, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son as Redeemer and Savior, and his Son, and through him he invites men to become, in the Holy Spirit, his adopted children, and thus heirs of his blessed life. God sent his only son to die for us because God made us to know him, to love him, and to serve him with all our strength. So if we're not questioning, if we're not learning, right, but also if we're not trusting, we're not doing what we're made for. That's why the world goes bonkers, is because everyone's not doing what they're supposed to do. Right? And everyone thinks, oh, doing what I'm supposed to do ruins everything else that I want to do, because you can't have fun with God. Saints running around with no heads. How is that not fun and awesome? Right? You can't have all this fun with God. I don't know when I've been happier without God. Okay? It's every time my children do something wrong, I just tell them, oh God, I love you. Like, right? So it's like God's got to be there, right? Just to save the kids. But again, the last piece of that is just human humility, right? It's just human humility in the fact that we know in our hearts that we need God. But it's ourselves that get in our own way and saying, I don't need God in this piece. I can handle this by myself, right? And that's my biggest thing, right? Like, it's hard to be motivated. Like, when Steph went down with being sick and stuff, and she's not moving around, and it's all the kids and me, like, getting to Mass on Sunday was incredibly difficult for me because I didn't have the motivation. I was tired. The kids were doing whatever the kids were doing, because I was watching them because I was a good parent. But I knew it there where they were. But it was hard. I wanted to leave God out at that moment. And so it was a real tough decision to be like, all right, let's go. Let's get dressed. I don't care if your hair is done. You look like all those anyways. Let's just get there. And it's just so something. Just a piece. I'll finish with this. Something that I'd encourage you to look up if that's something you struggle with. It's the litany of humility, right? And Richard has taught confirmation with me. He knows I made a big deal out of this during confirmation. But I pray the litany of humility fairly often as my prayers go, and it's because it puts God and others before everything that is you. And that's something that I need in my life. Like, I don't have a lot of doubts, but then at the same time, I feel very comfortable in who I am, and that's where I fight myself, every day. And so I think it's the same thing. If you're struggling with humility and letting God into places and trusting God in places, it's a perfect prayer to look up. And I don't have it for the projector or handouts or anything, so I gotta trust you on that one. So if you could just look that up, that'd be awesome. So I'm gonna stop now because, like I said, a pretty boring life, so not much more to go over. That was kind of it. So thanks.